right, well, basically, this is my last press conference as relates to the spring. I will talk briefly after the game on Saturday, but I gave you a format for the game. I gave you tentative rosters. You know, if injuries hold out this week, you know, we'll play as two separate teams. Coaches' staffs have been broken up. They're not down there. Coaches' staffs have been broken up. Weight room guys have been broken up. Trainers have been broken up. They're both on both sides. I will not be on the field. I'll be in the coach's box watching the game from up there. I'm not calling plays for either side. So I have two headsets so I can have an offensive defense from both sides to make sure that I know what's going on. It'll be the easiest way for me to do it and get around. So if you're looking for my beautiful face, I'm sorry to disappoint you. We'll leave for warm-ups from the locker room about noonish. Kickoff's a little after 1. Should be all set. If you have any questions on Saturday, I'll be happy to ask you. Obviously, we have that kids clinic going on, and our players are all fired up about that. It's at 10 o'clock, and we got all the alumni players coming in on Friday evening. I'm kind of excited about that. So we're in pretty good shape here. You know, last week to go. Knock on wood, not a whole bunch of guys banged up. You know, we got some bumps and bruises and some guys I'll be holding from the game. Not many of them, as you notice. So we have practice today and early meetings tomorrow morning, and practice on Thursday, and a meeting on Friday, and have that thing with the ex-players Friday night, and get going on Saturday. So, at that note, it's open forum.
I'm sure it's similar to most springs, but is there anything different about what you're looking for from this spring game?
Well, when I divided the teams, for example, if you look at those rosters, I would think that you'd see the blue team, for example, throwing the ball a lot, and you'd see the white team running the ball a lot. Even though I didn't put James Sims on the white team, I put him on the blue team. I think that offensively, obviously one of the biggest things playing into the strengths of our two quarterbacks, if Mike were to be the quarterback, it would be a run and play action featured team. Okay, if Jake were the quarterback, obviously it opens up a whole set of passes that he would be more efficient in the drop back passing game. So we're going to try to expose both teams to that, and I split the offensive line up some, where you'll see, not necessarily a first offensive line and second offensive line, like a couple of the road graders are on the run first team, so that it gives that team, an opportunity to go ahead and run the ball with some efficiency. And we did similar things with the defense. It's not necessarily all first defense on the blue and second defense on the white, although there's a lot of those guys there. Okay, knowing the mentality of what the offenses are going to do as the coaching staff's game plan, which they're going to game plan Wednesday afternoon for the game. That's when I've allocated them time to go ahead and do that. But now you have to plan with your defenses to go ahead and stop what they're doing. And I think that, I think the most important thing is now I expect from where we were last year at spring to now, to be some drastic improvements on both sides of the ball, and I'll be very disappointed if I don't see that, even in a spring game.
Can you talk a little bit about the progression of Mike Cummings and how from the end of last year to now, specifically in the passing game?
Mike, the strengths that Mike had last year, he still has, obviously. He makes far fewer mental mistakes, which I think is a very good thing. I think that he has a much better understanding of of terminology. His presence in the huddle has gotten better, where before he was reading plays, now he's calling plays. There's a big difference. Reading plays is I call in a play, you go to the wristband and you just read it off. You know, calling plays is you go to the wristband, you see the play and say, okay, here's what we got, fellas. You know, there's a difference. You know, there's a lot of things he still has to work on, but I think that, you know, the team views him as somebody that they could win football games with. And I think that if they don't think you could win with you playing, then you don't have a chance at that position.
What's the most encouraging signs that you'll have a better offense this year and a more balanced?
First of all, I think our running backs, which were our best position last year, are better by far this year. That's a good place to start. I think we got talent and depth, and they're better, and they were already good. And I think that if you can run the football with efficiency, the passing game shouldn't be as tough as we made it look last year. We made it look difficult somehow, you know, but I think that, you know, that opens a lot of doors. That opens a lot of doors for us offensively. I've been encouraged with a number of things. Obviously, you've heard about tweaks with some personnel and some things that we're doing, and I think we put some playmakers in positions to do some damage, and that's what we're hoping for in the passing game.
With more than 100 starts gone from 3 guys on the offensive line, is it going to be tough to duplicate the run blocking, for example, that you had last year?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, in a couple of cases, we should improve in the run blocking in a couple of cases. I'm not going to get into particulars right there, but your view of how they run block and my view of how they run block isn't exactly the same.
Thank God.
You know, so I think that a couple of guys that are involved here now, that is their forte. You know, their forte is run blocking. So I think that, you know, there's a chance in a couple of cases that we could actually improve.
How would you rate the intensity level of the spring session this year?
Well, there's been a lot more fights, and that's always a good thing. You know, there's a gray area as a head coach. There really is a gray area. You know, about trash talking and things like that, because where's the line between discipline, that you want to encourage it, or losing them. And I think when I allow them to turn it loose, which I usually do in scrimmage situations, I've talked about with them playing with a little bit of a chip on their shoulders. You'll hear them talk about chip on their shoulders, but I had explained to them really what that meant. I mean, and I think that if they keep on in the path that we're headed right now, because I think we're a long way from getting that ornery, nasty mentality across the board. But if they keep on improving the way they've been improving, I think that we'll be much better off going into this season.
Who are the guys you can count on to get in there and mix it up and bring it?
Well, I mean, Chris Morton's the trash talker of trash talkers. And we have a guy from Memphis/California coming that is the king of the trash talk, who is not yet on campus. I know he's going to be the biggest trash talker, and he's not even here yet. So there are some guys, and you want to know something that's been missing here somewhat. You need some of those guys, believe it or not. I think that any good defense has some trash talkers on it. Every good defense I've ever seen. Okay, and the same thing offensively. I mean, I have a candidate or two that I think on the offensive line can fall into that position. But Austin, to tell you the truth, right now they're worried about just learning the plays right now. I mean, they're not worrying about getting to that mentality. Once we get to the point where they know what to do, I think there'll be a couple of them that will have no problem turning it loose.
Who's the best trash talker you ever coached?
Oh, Brian Cox. Lawrence was a pretty good trash talker now. But, you know, he didn't have, you know, he was, my rookie year, you know, I'm there dealing with Lawrence now, and that's a pretty good trash talker there. That's a pretty good one to emulate. But I think Brian Cox, he was right at the top of the list. He was a guy I absolutely hated going against when he was with the Dolphins, but when he was on our team, he's my man, you know. You know, I saw him back down an entire Cleveland Brown team. They were notorious one year during warm-ups, when they came out for warm-ups, running right through your team. And he stood right where they were at warm-ups and challenged the whole team coming out, saying one guy goes through them, it's going to be him and them. And they ran right up the sideline, went down the other end, and went and did their warm-ups without ever going through our line. One guy. Wasn't surrounded by another 10. Pretty good stuff. Of course, I was there because I wanted to see it happen.
Do offensive guys ever trash talk much? Or is it always
Absolutely.
defense?
That number 12 in New England, I'm really proud of how he's learned how to trash talk as he's gotten older. You know, he was this mild-mannered California boy when we first started with him. You know, now he blames me for being a gutter mouth. You know, I mean, I don't know how I got, you know, how I would be ever accused of that. But he is a trash, those quarterbacks that trash talk, you know you got something good when you got a trash talking quarterback. Pretty good.
I guess, which specific players would you say has improved the most since the last time we talked to you a couple weeks ago?
Oh, there's so many guys that have improved a lot, you know. It'd probably be easier for you to give me a guy and for me to tell you, give me a guy and I'll tell you what I think. Go ahead, give me.
Who would say the linebacker group as a whole?
Well, Ben Heaney early in camp, I actually was a little disappointed with. I think he felt good about that he had a zillion tackles last year. I reminded him that he had a zillion tackles on a team that went 1-11, trying to bring him in its proper perspective. But I think as of late, he's been on a very, very big rise, playing clearly above everybody else at the position right now. So when we just talk about, you know, where you would all assume because he was a starter last year, that, you know, that, well, he's just a fixture. And early in camp, he really wasn't playing very well. But that's changed, and he's really, you know, he's really tied a few good ones together.
You talked last time we saw you about a few mental mistakes early because you hadn't moved guys around much, but you said that was coming. Any notable changes, depth chart wise or position wise or anything like that?
Give me a position.
Offensive line anymore?
There's been movement, and there will continue to be movement, but I kind of know how this is all going to end up. You know, for example, Smithburg was strictly a guard. He'll probably be playing center.
Okay.
I'm using that as an example.
Okay.
You know, but we'll wrap it up here. You know, we only have a couple of linemen coming in. You know, one JUCO, one high school kid that aren't here yet.
Nice.
But we kind of know where we're going into camp. We know where everyone's going to be settled in position-wise. There's still a little, because you have a couple fresh bodies coming in, so a little competition yet to take place. But I feel that we have a pretty good understanding where we're going to head into August, you know, with the offensive line.
Smithburg did that in junior college, played center.
He was more naturally a center.
Okay.
See, the thing is, when you come in here and you have to make all the calls,
Mhm.
he's one of those guys I was talking to Austin about. Okay, when you come in here, he's worrying about just making the calls right now. He's worrying about getting the quarterback center exchange. Okay, but he's one of those naturally nasty guys. But right now, he can't play that way because he's just worrying about his assignment on the play. You know, because when you first come in, you put him at guard so he doesn't have to make those calls. But now he's kind of slid into center because I think that, you know, we have some physicality at the guard position, and it gives us a chance. When we were talking about before about being physical, you know, we have a chance of throwing out a pretty physical offensive line out there.
Can he make significant progress? You know, May, June, July at that position, just being off the field?
Well, I think that the first thing that Heaps knows, his biggest assignment is help him work with the quarterback center exchange and those type of things with the centers. So Jake and Michael, together with the centers, will work, and I think that anything that has to be ironed out now can be ironed out before we get back. Now, as far as the game itself, I think once he doesn't have to worry about all those type of things, then you can just go out and play.
What about that left guard position? You said you moved Mike to center. Who's taking over at that left guard
Mike was
position?
at right guard.
Or right guard, but who's taking over that
Well, now
guard?
I'm using, it's really, if I had to pick two guards, okay, pick two guards, they would come from Nalu and a combination of Damon Martin and Randall Dent. I mean, which all three of them, believe it or not, are really three physical players. That's all their deal. Their deal is that they're all physical players.
What about Randall? I mean, how's he progressed? I mean, he was a guy
Actually, Randall's been running a lot of ones here in the last week, so, you know, he was sitting there at twos, and he was pouting a little bit, you know, he was pouting a little bit, but he was there for a reason, and he's run a lot of ones here in the last week or so.
How much more physical are you across the board, every position group?
Well, remember
How
now,
much was that needed?
let me just reiterate the fact that I still got, 7 JUCO kids coming in on defense that aren't here yet. That I think that all are in the mix, first or second. So all the stuff that I got going right now, I see all these guys coming in being ones or twos. And a lot of them I could see being ones. Okay, now it's a little different on the offensive side of the ball. You know, from the 2 linemen coming in, well, I'm expecting help. I'm expecting help from at least one of them. Okay, the quarterbacks, we're gonna have to wait and see whether or not they can close the gap. And the tight end coming in here, we'll see whether or not where he can compete here. Now, the receiver position, I'm counting on help with the guys coming in. So it all depends on the position, and not to mention the fact that, we got a kicker coming in that I think is pretty good.
McKay and Matthews, last time you said if you had to play that day, they would start. Have they held that?
If we had to play today, they would start.
More about them and what they've done, or both ways?
McKay reminds me of Keyshawn when I first got to the Jets. Routes are always a little short. Okay, not the fastest guy in the world. Okay, big, strong, tough. Will catch everything you throw to him. Will block anyone with physicality. Okay, a lot of times his routes are a little short because he doesn't have confidence that he can get there. Okay, but he reminds me a lot of Keyshawn. So, Keyshawn was the first pick in the entire draft, coming out right there. He reminds me a lot of Keyshawn. They even wear the same number. But he reminds me a lot of him. Christian was probably the most pleasant surprise. Now Christian, we started off, remember, as a 2, so it wasn't like he had a long way to go. But he's clearly played better than the other receivers. And the guy who actually has been on the rise for the last week and a half has been Trey Parmalee. Trey Parmalee, we challenged him. Remember I said I had a lot of incomplete guys? Well, the thing we challenged him on was, he's young, okay, and a lot of times when you're young, you're not real physical. And we challenged him on his physicality, and he's been significantly improved over the last week and change.
Who would you say's probably jumped out the most in the secondary?
Well, the guy who makes the least amount of mistakes that shows up every day is Cassius. Okay, but I like the improvement that Jacory's made. Okay, and McDonald, he can cover anybody. So, but once again, there's another position now. Remember now, we got 3 DBs coming in. 3. We got 3 guys that can all play. This secondary, the change from last year's secondary to this year's secondary, is gonna be probably as dramatic or drastic as any position on the team.
It's safety. You have Johnson coming in, but you also have Shaw and Allen. How are they developing? And
We like both Shaw and Allen. You know, the thing is, Isaiah is more range than all those guys.
more,
Range, you know, as a safety, you need to have range. That means cover sideline to sideline. You know, Isaiah is a sideline to sideline guy.
is that a speed issue or an agility issue, or what makes a guy
No, well,
have
see,
range?
normally, in the olden days, they would have a free safety and a strong safety. You know, by nature, both of those guys are more the strong safety mode. You know, Greg might be a little bit more the free safety mode. Okay, but by nature, they're both more in the strong safety mode. Now, there's good and bad with that. Good because they bring a lot of physicality, bad that they won't have as much range. And so that's kind of where we are with those guys.
We saw at the open practice that you worked on special teams a lot. Do you feel pretty good about your return game?
Well, first of all, you don't get very many kickoff returns.
Sure.
Okay, that, you know, although the other teams manage to get a lot of kickoff returns, you know, you really don't get too many of them. So really, the number one thing is punt return. And the one thing that you have to, the game has changed now, Matt, because with spread punt that everyone's using right now, it isn't like the NFL when you only can send 2 guys down. You know, in the NFL, you only can send 2 guys down. So if you can block those 2 guys, okay, and you catch the ball, okay, you got a chance to make plays. Here, everyone can go right now. So you spread the whole field. The ball's punted. You have, instead of having 2 guys down there, you got 7 guys down there. So you won't see very many teams in college have big yards on the return game unless a kick either overkicked it or hits a line drive. You know, you won't see a lot of big returns by the nature of the culture of how teams are punting the ball these days, and how most teams have a kickoff guy that 50% of the time, you know, you're starting the ball on a 25.
And how the offensive tackle's good.
Well, I mean, the guy, you know, Aslan's been solid the whole camp. You know, Lewandowski's a better pass blocker than run blocker. Okay, by girth alone, which he continues to get better. But we've actually had 2 pleasant surprises. And Riley Spencer has played himself back into the mix, which I didn't know if that was going to happen, John, to be honest with you, because I hadn't seen it early in camp. But his last couple practices have been clearly his best. And to be honest with you, the other guy who I really thought would be much further away is Beckman. I thought he was much further away than where he is, but he played like 45 reps the other day in the scrimmage, and he played tackle, and we played him a little bit at guard too, and he's actually shows a lot of promise, to be honest with you.
Is there anything in particular you'd like to see from Jake? What would make a good day for him on Saturday?
20 for 20, 300 yards, bunch of touchdowns. Now, that's the offensive coordinator for the blue team. As the head coach, there are a lot of negatives what I just said to you, because now I'm worried about those guys playing defense over there that they're going against too. You know, so I'll be the head coach that day, so that'll make me one side of me happy and one side of me saying, oh, we got a problem here.
How much involved will your running back be in the passing game for Saturday?
Depends on which running back you're talking about.
Let's go with Pearson.
He'll be very, very, very involved.
How is his role on this team evolving?
Pardon me?
How is his role on the team evolving right now?
Very well. You know, obviously, we have big plans for Tony. You know, we have big plans for Tony. We didn't do all that research at Devon Austin for nothing now. I mean, this is a copycat business. All those people who try to act like all their ideas are original, they're all liars. Okay, because when you get somebody who's doing something that's really good, and you have somebody that you think kind of fits that bill, then you go study them, and you say, how are they doing this? How are they doing that? You know, now Tony is clearly still the most dynamic running back we have. Okay, the only problem is he might be the most dynamic receiver we have as well. I mean, Tony's not a guy that we can detach and he's just a running back. He is a definite pain in the butt for the defense because they really don't know whether to call him a running back or a wide receiver, because he's shown in a short period of time that he can play detached from the backfield and run legitimate routes and catch the ball, and most importantly, he can get open. And as you know, last year when we were playing, that was an issue for us. But he can get open, and you know, that gives you a chance.
We don't argue back to your days with the Chiefs, it sounds like you're talking about that from the cluster.
Yeah, but Tony's faster than Dexter by a significant margin. You know, I think that although Tony's got toughness, I mean, hardly anyone was tougher than Dexter. I mean, I love Dexter coming out because he was a tough, pound for pound, I put Dexter with anyone. Dexter was quicker than fast. You know, Tony's fast. I mean, Tony's in that 4.3 and change range, where Dexter's that 4.5 guy. So 2/10 is, you know, that's significant. I would take Dexter too if you want to give him to me. You know, I think we'd get him in there.
You talk a little bit about some of the freshmen and some of the guys whose names might pop up on Saturday. Obviously, we've talked about Colin Spencer.
Well, I mentioned Beckman. You know, I'm not saying that Beckman's, you know, challenging for a starting job right now, but I mean, I've been very encouraged. I've been very encouraged with Beckman. I've been very pleased with the way it's going. Like I talked about Trey. Even Trey played last year out of necessity, not out of want. In reality, Trey would have been a perfect redshirt candidate last year. And to be honest with you, if he wasn't sitting as our third guy right now, you know, I'd be contemplating it now. But he's one of the guys striving to get on the field. If you talk about guys on the defensive side of the ball, Courtney Ornick's been running, you know, almost a whole spring, you know, sitting there with the ones. Now, physically, he's going to have to get bigger. Okay, he's still a bit undersized. Okay, he's got very, very good athleticism. And we mentioned those two safeties before, both Greg Allen and Tevin. I mean, those two guys are as physical as anybody we have on our team. You know, so just going through there, you know, there's a number of guys right there that you could see, and that doesn't even include Jordan Shelley Smith, who's been one of the bigger, most pleasant surprises here too, because right now he might be our best blocking tight end. I mean, he might be. And when we started recruiting, we weighed about 215. You know, all you thought he was going to be was a pass catching tight end, and he's bigger than everybody. You know, I mean, Smiley's been out all spring, so we'll have to see what happens, because he's about ready to go now as the spring's over. And he's going to have his work cut out for him to beat that guy out, because that kid showed up. I mean, obviously Jermaine's the guy, but you know, we don't play with just one tight end.
Most football players are very broad-shouldered. Tony doesn't. He seems more narrow. Does that work to his advantage because he's harder to catch? Or?
No, I think just Tony's just a fast, quick, athletic, you know, football player that's got very, very good skills. And on top of everything else, Tony's got very, very good football intelligence. You know, there's two different types of intelligence. You know, everyone comes across as if they present themselves well, but he has very good football intelligence. Once you tell him something, you got it.
I guess between the offensive line and defensive line so far, as a collective whole, who's been kind of winning the majority of the battles?
I think the guy who's been the best two players on our collective lines have been Keon Stowers and Chris Moore. Keon Stowers has been ruining practice, which is a good thing for the defense. And Chris Martin, I mean, we can't block him with one.
Did you say ruining practice?
Ruining practice.
What do you mean by that?
It means he's in the backfield every time you turn around. I mean, he's off the ball, he's lightning quick, he makes plays, he plays with enthusiasm, you know, he's infectious to be around, but, he's been as good as it gets.
In past years, Christian Matthews had a couple big spring games here. Last year, you made the joke about us wanting to put a statue up for Michael Reynolds and what he did. How much do you evaluate what guys get done in this game, and what kind of weight does that hold?
Stats mean absolutely nothing to me, but how they carry themselves mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically, that means a lot to me. I like the way, if I'm sitting up in the box and I see people not paying attention, like I'll look at things that you're not looking at. You'll look at the game, I'll look at the guys who aren't in the game. Are they paying attention? What are they doing? Are they just goofing off on us? There's a lot of things I'll be looking for different than you're looking for. But I think there's a certain way good football players carry themselves and good football teams carry themselves. For example, we had this long scrimmage on Saturday. One of the things I really liked during the scrimmage was the enthusiasm on the defensive sideline. Now, I'm calling the plays. Okay, I'm sitting in the golf cart behind the plays, and the offense is on the other sideline, but I noticed, I felt the enthusiasm on the defensive sideline. Now, that doesn't mean that they were winning the scrimmage, but I felt the enthusiasm. And those type of things are important to me.
Last year, your confidence in the kicking game was about as low as it could get. Where's that at right now?
Do you know Trevor Perdula?
I've met him, yeah.
Good. So have I. He's lifted my spirit. Let's just leave it at that. Let's not go any further than that right now. He's lifted my spirit.
Are these typical spring game rules, or are they modified for this particular?
Well, you don't want kickoffs because there's too much chance for injury. The punt team, you have hold-ups so that you can get all the guys that don't play very much. You can get them in there without having to get a punt blocked. Because the punt team is the special team you have to spend more time on than anything. Because getting a punt block is the easiest way to lose a game. So by not allowing them to rush the punt, just making them hold up, what you're doing there, it's not to take away punt return. So there's some guys that won't play a lot in the game. I want everyone to play in the game. Some parents come to the game for the spring game. I want them to play. I don't want them to see their kids stand on the sideline the whole time and not get in. So really, what are you doing? You're taking the threat on special teams away, on punt, kickoff, and field goal. You're still going to have field goals. You're just turning it into non-threatening. But other than that, on offensive defense, it's going to be full go. And even the quarterbacks are live if they're out of the pocket. So you'll notice down there, one of my rules was about red shirts, right? Red shirt protect the quarterbacks in the pocket only. Okay, so if they're in a drop back pass, okay, and there's a runaway blitzer, we'll blow the whistle, and that's the end of the play. But if they're running an option, they're full go, just like everybody else.
You mentioned football's a copycat sport. When you got Justin McKay to remind you a little bit of Keyshawn, do you go through your own head and think about plays that worked with Keyshawn and might duplicate?
You do some of the things you did with him. I mean, for example, let's talk about getting off the line of scrimmage. You got press getting off the line of scrimmage. Now, do you realize you have about 4 or 5 different ways of getting open? If a guy comes and plays you bump and one. Bump and run. Everyone thinks that there's just one thing. I mean, there's about 4 or 5 different ways. Okay, one of the ways you get open is to hit them right in the mouth. Because the last thing a DB expects is a wide receiver to come off and hit them in the mouth. And that was one of the things that Keyshawn used to do, and Justin's been practicing it, and he's pretty good at it.
Can you actually hit a guy in the mouth? Did you get under the
Well,
face
I mean,
mask?
with the rules, actually, you could. Actually, you can't, but you could.
It's not legal, but you,
You know, I mean, you would have just taken your helmet and hit him right under the jaw. Okay, and it usually had proper effect. But now, today where you can't lead with your head, you know, at just about any position known to mankind, you can come off, and it's called a block release. You come off like you're gonna block him before you go ahead and release. And there's different guys that use different tactics. I mean, it depends on who you are. You talked about Dexter before. You had Dexter and you have Dwayne Bowe. They don't use the same tack to get open. Dwayne's a taller, slower guy. Dexter's a smaller, quicker guy. You use a different tack to get open. It isn't like you use the exact same thing versus the exact same coverage.
but formerly he'll try to go around and just,
When all possible, that's what they'll try to do.
wasn't sure if you knew that'd be a good approach.
With Scott Vessel's being his first full spring being a position coach, can you kind of talk about what he's brought to the table?
See, I've been with him down in Florida 2 years ago. That's what he is exactly what I thought he'd be. You know, he's wired for sound. You know, the players getting a little used to his energy. But, you know, a lot of you guys have, you know, talked about, you know, Glasgow. I mean, they're very, very similar. Just one's on the offensive side of the ball and one's on the defensive side of the ball. Knowledgeable, I mean, student, you know, well received by the players, tough, but then again, energetic, you know, high-fiving when the time's appropriate. I mean, I think he has a chance to be really good. He does, he has a chance to be really good. Don't tell him that.
As you mentioned Glasgow, you've got a lot of JUCO recruits, and he covers states that have a lot of JUCOs. What qualities made him successful in helping you get those guys, if you agree with that?
Well, I mean, being around him, you know, 18 hours a day for a year, you know, which basically what I was, or basically with the kid 18 hours a day. And when you're with somebody that much time, you get a feel for what you're gonna get. And he's exactly what I thought he'd be. I mean, that's what I expected from him. I would have expected nothing less. You know, and I expect, you know, very similar, you know, results from Vestal at the same time. When you're around people that many hours, you usually, you know, you don't miss too many times. You know, you miss when you don't know them and you hire them, not when you do know them and you hire them.
Is the energy ever get annoying, or do you just realize it's good for the program?
When I want to tone down the energy, I usually don't have too much trouble. All right, what else? Are you guys, you're gonna miss me now. I mean, it's almost over. Saturday, we're just gonna talk about the game a little bit, and then one of the MVPs that you, I think they pick them, right? So good, you picked them, you can talk to them. I don't want to talk to them. But, you know, Saturday, the game will be over, and I'll go down to the locker room and talk to them a little bit, and then I'll come right up and do the stuff with you guys, and then we'll get them up here, and we'll wrap this up, and we're gonna be in for a week, and then we're gonna hit the road recruiting.
Michael Reynolds does have some loud talent, it seems like at times. Has he gotten better with consistency, or?
Like the other day in the scrimmage, he had a couple, 2.5 sacks in the scrimmage. His problem, and he knows this, is inconsistency. Some days he'll look really good, some days he'll look really bad. And, you know, we're moving towards, you better have more good days than bad days, because we can't get you involved. We can't get you involved until you become a more consistent player.
Hey, Coach, when the spring game goes in, you mentioned recruiting. How many kids do you try to get to in the next month or so? How many places do you visit?
Well, first of all, I can't go see anyone myself, okay, but we will, you know, use every visit that we have humanly possible. And one of the reasons why I changed the schedule and moved the game earlier is the JUCOs have spring games usually the end of April. You know, end of April was when they're wrapping up, you know, their springs. And because we didn't finish till the end of April, we didn't get into any of those schools. And now because we've hit them pretty hard, it gives us, our first week out, we'll go heavy into their last week of junior colleges. And then the first week in May, we'll make sure we're covering all the areas that we need to cover. Obviously, our high-density areas where we've got multiple people in, okay, but we'll go out on the road for 2 weeks, then we'll come off the road for a week, then we'll go back on the road for 2.5 more weeks. So we'll utilize every day that we're allowed to go out, and every visit we're allowed to go out. You know, we'll be out there in force, and we kind of have the plan already set up. You know, every once in a while, there's a change on the fly. You know, for example, you might be going to see somebody, and you know, it might be 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they just committed to so-and-so, and you're going to their school to go see them, and they just committed to so-and-so and said, don't bother coming. You know, so you might all of a sudden be in the airport making a flight to go somewhere else, to go see somebody else, or, you know, go get in a rent-a-car and driving 120 miles to go to a different school because that one just went by the board. So, you know, you have to be a little bit flexible.
Of the guys you have here now this spring, do you have enough depth at outside linebacker, and who have been the most impressive guys in that position?
Well, remember now at the outside linebacker position, we've been running basically, you know, Ornick and Mora, but you know we got Jenkins, Moore, and Ash both coming in that play the same position. Okay, just like at Buck, even though we got 4 guys there, we'll probably start Goaz over there at that position when he first gets here, because his best thing was, you know, outside linebacker as a pass rusher. Now physically, he could play inside linebacker. Okay, so, but the first thing he wants to do in this league is learn who can play on the edge. So, you know, we have some candidates coming in to add to what we have right here to see who can play on the edge. And that's not even including taking some of these DBs and putting them in those positions as well. We might be playing a whole bunch of DBs. We might be going from no DBs to putting 7 of them out there. I mean, because there's a lot of them that we think we think we get some DBs that can play. I was much more concerned at this time last year about where we are than I am right now. Of course, I'm concerned about everything, but you know, having candidates to compete, I'm not concerned about.
Is there one unit or position group that you're more concerned about than any other?
Well, I mean, on the surface, let's say from your perspective, okay, it would either be offensive line or wide receiver. That would be the 2 that you guys would say. But remember now, we just had this conversation about Tony. I mean, the whole game changes. The whole game changes when Tony's involved in that mix. I mean, because now everyone's battling for second. I mean, everything, the whole depth chart really changes when you add the possibility, and you don't know when he's going to be in the backfield or not be in the backfield. That's, you know, that gives a chance for us to be creative too. But I think at the wide receiver position, we have some people coming in that we think have a chance to be very competitive to help us play. And at the offensive line position, I think that we have a pretty good idea where we're heading.